That was the call to order. Good afternoon. Welcome back to After Lunch. I'm David Kelleher with the Minnesota Historical Society, and I wanted to welcome you to the Minnesota History Center, the home of the Minnesota Historical Society. We are thrilled to have this gathering here over several days at the Minnesota History Center. We are, as you can see on the map in the pink at the bottom of that screen, we are part of the Capitol complex, and we are very excited to be part of this process, but also to learn from and contribute to this process. We have a stake in this process to make sure that the Capitol complex is a vibrant place, that our visitors feel connected with the Capitol building, because so many visitors do a package deal between visiting the Capitol building itself, the mall, and the History Center. So we're so glad to have you here. We're sorry that you can't be here tomorrow. We had a big event on the books, but you'll enjoy being in the Veteran Service Building and that spectacular view of the Capitol Mall from that building tomorrow. But when you come back on Thursday, carve out some time so you can A, go shopping in the shops on the first floor, and B, go up to the exhibits on the third floor of the Minnesota History Center, where you can learn about the many, many stories of Minnesota history, the people and places and things that have happened. So welcome. I hope the spirit of learning and community that is really part of this building infuses your series of meetings. Thanks for being here.
Okay, so what we're going to do next is our team has taken pictures of everything that's been drawn. If you had agreed to speak for your group, nobody agreed for my group to speak, so I have to do it. But if you have agreed to speak, why don't you come down? And we'll start with the yellow team, and they're going to basically present, whatever they've come up with for 5 minutes. Then we'll open it up. If there's any questions or comments from the larger audience for 5 minutes, then we'll go to the next group, 5-minute presentation, 5-minute comments. And then after that, we're going to break back up into our small group, pay attention to what the other groups have come up with, because our next job is to sort of pull it all together and for each group to develop a framework plan on their own before coming back here in the afternoon. So thanks again for everybody that's been participating. I know we're sort of losing people throughout the day, but that's all right. And so we're excited to see what Yellow Team has come up with. So, Yellow Team.
We're Yellow Team. I'm Alan. I'm a planner at Sasaki.
I'm Luisana from Latino Organization.
My name's Dustin, and I'm with Focus Minnesota.
Do these mics work? Hello? Okay. So we were the Connect team, and we had some clear ideas that came out of this. Dustin, would you like to identify what are the gateways that we discussed?
Yeah, we were talking about points of access, and we really identified these 4 pink circles that are surrounding the Capitol as important places to get navigation. So one would be coming off of the highway and that university exit. It would be really helpful to have some cardinal directions to navigate the complex. The other would be by foot, coming in from downtown, that Cedar Bridge. We made the note that it feels just very industrial, still very cold, so it's not the warmest welcome into the space. The other would be closest to us, coming over John Ireland, to have some clear signage as to the buildings surrounding and the Capitol itself. And our last point of entry coming off of public transit, right there at Rice and University, would be really helpful to have clear guidance to navigate the campus areas.
And I think that these gateways tie in really well to some of the ideas that my table came up with and was also talked about at Louisiana's table in terms of a highway lid at that kind of cedar gateway. So that highway lid we discussed as something that understandably is kind of expensive, but basically we could take Wabasha and Cedar Street bridges and kind of create a bridge between them so they're like one large bridge. That would be a priority project that connects down to the History Theater, which appropriately used to be the site of the old Capitol. And then future kind of infill bridges on top of the highway could start to kind of stitch the city back together, but those could be implemented in phases so that it's not such a huge cost impact. We also thought about this gateway a lot, that relationship to the LRT, and thinking that if you're visiting from out, if you came here by airplane and you're visiting from Minneapolis, that's probably your first entry onto the site. So something there that really clearly welcomes you in would be important. Anything you want to add?
Yes, and the pedestrian perspective, we want more people come to this area, and we want all these sidewalks and walking path be more welcoming with trees and pedestrian infrastructure like a bench. Yeah, I think that was.
Yeah, I think there you also had like a kind of age-friendly environment idea to support connectivity.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that, obviously, we wanted to make sure that that it's field trip friendly, that it has existing stuff so that kids can navigate the space, that there's stuff to scale to accommodate children. We also thought that there would be a lot of situations where grandparents are taking their kids, that kind of intergenerationality. We wanted to highlight the ways that we could accommodate that in the space, thinking through things like immediate access to bathrooms, having places that they can burn off energy and it wouldn't be so disruptive, the ability to make noise. And also the people who are there as activists to have a place that their whole family could go and be participants in that sort of social sphere.
I think there,
Also, we're thinking about how to make this place more safe for pedestrians and for people who visit. We agree it's important to add more lighting for all the streets, so we can explore this area just in the evenings when we don't have sunlight.
yep. And I think we also had archaeologists in our group, and we discussed ways to bring history, archaeology as something people could interact with to attract them, something that changes over time to give them new reasons to come to the Capitol. And using those things, you kind of see these pink dots that we have as ways to kind of draw people in and encourage them to enter. And certain pinch points, like between the parking at Senate Office Building and transportation, thinking of that as a gateway that could be lined with like public art or something that makes it very inviting to welcome people from our neighborhoods to the west of here. So are there any questions? Is anyone, oh, it'd be probably hard to get the mic around, but. Yes, here I can try to get a mic over to you.
I just want to say I like how you incorporated some green space from the park on the west, that sculpture park. I don't remember what it's called, but I like that that's included in there because that is a park that I've been to many rallies or protests that start there. And of course, it's awesome to walk down John Ireland Boulevard to the Capitol, but also including that space to connect that neighborhood over to the Capitol Mall.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much to our team. Look forward to working in the afternoon. Blue team next.
Okay, we were the blue team, or the preserve group. We had a small but mighty team. And we're going to kind of do this in 2 separate chunks, but some of the big ideas that we talked about, the upper mall, we want to preserve that as kind of this democratic stage. It's where people come, they protest, but maybe that gives a little bit more flexibility to the lower mall. So keep that upper stage, make sure people can gather there, but maybe new programming can come down to the lower mall, closer to the Veterans Service Building. With that, you know, we also talked about this idea of a collection of green spaces, even kind of drawing upon those neighborhood parks that go up kind of north of the site. Is there a way that we can create a storytelling mechanism? Is there a way we can connect those parks and people can wander, walk through the neighborhoods, and they learn about history along the way? We know that we need new commemorative artwork or sculptures, things that are inclusive, that celebrate a variety of different people. And so we've identified the 2 surface parking lots that are proposed as future green spaces, as spaces where that can happen. And people also noted this idea that we want a space where people can come and tell their story. You know, we're going to try as hard as we can to make sure all of our commemorative spaces tell an inclusive history, but people might want to come and tell something that we haven't captured. So making sure we provide a space where they can come, they can talk, people can gather, and so forth. We know John Ireland, similar to the last group, is this kind of very ceremonial street, but Cedar and St. Peter's are streets that a lot of people like to walk along to get to downtown. You can zoom in if you need. Oh, was my thing right in the middle? So making sure that people can cross those bridges, they're more substantial and more comfortable as well. And then we've identified the viewing platform at Cass Gilbert's Park as this really awesome opportunity where people can come, they can look over the site into downtown. And then lastly, before I hand it off, you know, neighborhoods and houses historically came right up to the Capitol steps, and that's something that a lot of people talked about. And so we know that, you know, with the opportunity of the Sears site and different things like that, is there a way to bring housing, bring those communities and neighbors a little bit closer to the Capitol and try to remember kind of what that was before the larger parking lots and things came up? And I think the only last thing is that, you know, the community identified these commercial hubs kind of north of the site along Rice Street that were historically, you know, it's where people went to hang out, they would grab a bite to eat. And is there a way that we can invigorate that and bring that back?
And so we also talked a lot about, like, preservation was difficult only because it interconnects with a lot of stuff, so we ended up talking a little bit about everything. But we focused a lot on kind of the storytelling of the space and making sure that there's acknowledgement and intentionality behind speaking about the different histories of Minnesota and the different people that have called it home and still do. And so part of that was talking about using the connectivity that we're aiming for with this project and maybe using some of those nodes as ways to start telling those stories as you're approaching the Capitol Mall area, and maybe each one has a different focus, so that way you can experience a different side of the mall and of Minnesota's history and culture each time you come. So that way you're not just doing everything one time and you've done the Capitol. And we also talked about different ways to integrate being in the space as far as using the existing framework of the Cass Gilbert plan, but also including a little bit more maybe meandering and smaller scale places for contemplation, and then using the state capitol building itself as an anchor point, but then also the overlook point that's just behind it as another focal point for people to go to be able to take in both the Capitol and the city as a whole, because right now it's kind of secluded back there. What else did I miss?
Yeah, I think we wanted to kind of explain the complexities and all the different stories that we want to tell, and that it's a multi-layered approach. And I think in terms of a large framework, when you're on the complex, there are stories to tell that way, but actually drawing it out into the neighborhood. So how do we relate those stories to Frogtown? How do we relate those stories to the environment and to the landscape and kind of drawing water into the site. And so that each time you come back to the Capitol, you see something new and it's kind of integrated. So you can kind of do one loop one day and come back with your kids and do another loop. It can be very interactive. And thinking about kind of that idea of preservation and memorialization, what does that mean? It doesn't necessarily need to mean an object. It can just be the way that you see yourself within that landscape. There could be colors that are represented in the planting that you relate to within your community. There are kind of materiality. How do we do that at a human scale? So how do the streetscapes and the details in the streets kind of really relate to your identity and your story within the Capitol complex? And so you can always, even at that very human, day-to-day personal scale, when you're walking down the street, you can see little influences in the landscape, you can see influences in the public space, so that you feel welcome. And I think what we're trying to do is, at those thresholds, kind of have a celebratory moment, but at the same time, those influences do kind of transition out into the neighborhoods as well. And so some of those adjacent open spaces and parks, can we start to tell the stories there, so they're nestled within the community, and that's the beginning of the storytelling that then culminates as we get closer to the Capitol complex.
Yeah, and as we were looking at the map, we started to realize that it should really take advantage of the other cultural institutions that are nearby as well. So it should be more of a connection between the Capitol to like the Children's Museum, the Science Museum, James J. Hill House, the Minnesota Historical Center. So all of those connecting together to give someone a cohesive experience of learning about Minnesota and really getting different aspects of it that's all interconnected.
And I think the last thing that I would add is that kind of we're thinking about the verbal storytelling as well, live performance. How do we, because it kind of touches upon the activate theme as well, but are there spaces that people can come and storytell with a small group of people or even a large group at a big event, and trying to tie that into the overall design of the spaces and thinking about this range of scale of storytelling and this range of scale of spaces. Any questions? The blue is just kind of talking about water and drawing the water story, and so that's more related to kind of the ecology. So the yellow is kind of more related to kind of the people in the urban context. The blue is the water story, and the green is obviously the landscape. On to red team, it seems.
Thank you.
Or
thank
Josh.
Yeah. Does nobody from my team wants to get up on stage and talk? There we go. Also, I don't know if you realize this, but this building literally changed the entire education system to fit our color themes. All of that interior design is brand new. They changed it just for us. All right.
I'm not prepared, but
No, that's all right. So I can hit on the big points, and
okay.
then
I'll fill in.
yeah. Why is this? Oh, here it is. Okay, so we were the Activate group, and sorry, I had a meeting, so I wasn't able to do as good of a sketch as Philip. But we sort of settled on these 6 big themes in terms of activation, and I'll try and sort of explain them, and then we can go to the maps. The first one I wrote down was grading for functionality, and this was really about really dealing with the slope that exists there. There was an idea put forth to like, can we actually get a size of lawn and a shape of lawn that can actually support true multi-field kind of recreation? So if somebody wanted to set up a soccer game or an ultimate frisbee game, but also the idea of sort of creating a series of terraces. A couple of our groups talked about a series of terraces, so regrading some of the very extreme slopes to be more terraced so that actual events and functionality could happen there, and at the same time integrating in some potential sort of security measures associated with that. An exciting idea that 2 of our tables came up with independently was Cass Gilbert Overlook Park, so as like an epic play space, and so something that like the adjacent community to the north would use, but also something that would literally draw people from around the metropolitan area, and making sure that it had snacks and bathrooms and views and the viewing for goats there as well. We also talked about, I guess, regular programming, and then that led us into a conversation around, the idea of some sort of like parks conservancy or a capital mall conservancy that was actually charged with regular programming of the space as opposed to just permitting. And then that group could also, take on education, potentially like an ambassadors program, so that there was that kind of regular thing. We also talked a lot about the integration of indoor and outdoor uses, and so, for example, from a wayfinding standpoint or from an activation standpoint, could we have spaces that actually, outside, that actually talk about what is being done inside? I think we even talked about like a big snow plow that literally sat outside of the Department of Transportation building that could be more sort of thematic. We talked about the transformation of MLK into a usable space, and so potentially closing the segment between the two malls spaces, or maybe like a shared street concept, and then business opportunities on campus. And then the last one, I think you said this, is we have to fix the interstate system. There's the ambassador program there. We talked about a series, like really identifying a series of nodes around campus that we put a lot of emphasis on activating, and so realizing that you're not going to be able to put restaurants and retail and coffee shops everywhere, like where does it actually make the most sense? We too also identified the interstate and the concept of potential land bridges, to extend and make that connection. Do you want to say
Yeah, I'll just
anything?
add on this too. I think this aligns with a couple of the other groups. Rice and University as like a major node, a major hub. So other groups identified it for a connectivity standpoint. If you're coming in from Minneapolis or you're taking the light rail from or to the airport, you'd use that access point. And there's already a decent amount of foot traffic there from people getting off and exchanging from buses and light rail. So how can we activate ground floor uses so that it supports people actually staying there and going to coffee shops and then kind of going into the site that way?
Yeah, and then this was a sketch that was done late, but really, I think driving home the point that intersection needs to feel sort of urban, and just given that that's likely the place that would be most conducive to supporting business. And then from the standpoint of the zooming into the mall, a couple of key things. I think we spent a fair amount of time talking about the kind of section that existed. So if you cut a cross cut through the site, and what we were talking about again is like creating a series of terraces that actually celebrated the sort of architecture of the Capitol, putting it on sort of more of a common ground, and even as you go out to the edges, we even talked about the opportunity of like, could you actually wedge a visitor center like in that sort of plinth? And then taking the upper mall and really trying to flatten a piece out of it so that it could support that, that programming and create those terraces and present opportunities for signage and commemorative works. And then a couple of key points. Do you want to talk about the buildings on the corner?
Yeah, there's opportunities with surface parking lots to have it be developable land. So how do we support different activated, like a restaurant, for example, that would have a great vista of both downtown and the Capitol, but would also support people who work on the Capitol Mall and want a place that they just walk a few minutes and could get some lunch or dinner or happy hour, just closing in those spaces and kind of holding the corners so that they're usable, walkable, and then grounding the Capitol Mall and celebrating the fact that it's civic space but has more developable land.
Yeah, and then the last thing we talked about, MLK. Right now all the food trucks kind of line up on John Ireland, but we discussed, if you did some sort of shared street condition or even made that fully pedestrian, could that be a location for in the summertime, like an amazing water feature, in the winter time, could it be a skating rink, and could that actually be a space that the food trucks are able to sort of park, and this becomes a real activated plaza, and those buildings could host restrooms or warming facilities, so that there was a strong connection between where the activation is and those amenities. And then we did talk about really adding in water elements. I think everybody was drawn to that concept. Okay. Yeah. Any questions? No? Okay, that's it. Green team.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Anna, and again, I'm with Capital Region Watershed District. So last but not least, we're gonna talk about the growth potentials here at the Capitol Mall area, and they do abound in terms of stormwater management, vegetation, activation, all those things, climate resiliency, adaptation. We've got three of us co-presenting on this topic. I'll focus on the stormwater management piece, obviously, and then I'll hand it over to Raul and Joy, both pastors in the metro area, to talk about gardens and the community involvement under this topic. So as far as stormwater management, there is a lot of potential here, as has been shared. There's very limited treatment in this area, and we were looking at stormwater management from the themes of bringing water back, both literally and figuratively, to visitors of the site and the state of Minnesota. We're also looking at rainwater as a resource. So with that, we synthesized around a few ideas. One that was, I find fairly innovative and is newer to me, is the fact that there are high groundwater levels in some of these areas. There are springs in which the state is already capturing these groundwater springs and pumping that water, clean water, into the storm sewer. So what if we captured that instead and used it for irrigating the lawn area that needs to be retained for the rallies and larger community events? So capturing stormwater in a couple locations there. There's also a lot of stormwater runoff in the area that we think that could be captured in both green infrastructure practices like rain gardens or tree trenches along the boulevards of John Ireland Boulevard, also along MLK Boulevard. There was a really interesting idea to incorporate permeable pavement potentially along MLK on the between the upper and lower parts of the mall and create a different feel for that space. There are parking lots that maybe are underutilized in the southern corners of the mall that could be converted to green space, like with rain gardens, tree trenches, and other gardens. We also thought this would be a good opportunity to connect the community to what happens on the landscape and the Mississippi River, which is less than a mile away. So trying to tell that story within this site. Maybe the captured rainwater could be used in the existing water features that are on the Capitol Mall, or a new recirculated water feature, more of a stream next to a play area. Because we love our water here in Minnesota and we like it clean. So I think that's that for stormwater management.
To piggyback, we talked about community involvement. I'm Pastor Raul. I'm a pastor here in the Twin Cities in Mound, Minnesota, and we talked about restroom access and having permanent shelters with restroom and water fountains and stuff, so that people can go to the bathroom when they're walking around the campus, and having a lot of signage around, and signage with different languages and stuff, so people can learn the history of what's going around, walking around the mall area. We also talked about having a bunch of benches out around for sitting and stuff, and not just benches, but we have a beautiful rock quarries here in Minnesota, and granite and stuff, and having those benches made of those granite pieces and having them stationed around the campus, and having those as rest areas, and having those as rest areas, if someone wants to take a nap on it, take a nap on it. We don't want one of these places where there's needles and stuff where it's uncomfortable for people to sit or rest. You know, we want it to be a welcoming place for everybody. And we also want to make sure there were some things about water features that we talked about, like at the state fair, how they have the tank for the fishes of Minnesota, you know, or something kind of like that within the middle, if you can see it up there. And then within that area, having an all abilities kind of pond where people can just walk in or wheel in, and it's kind of a splash pad kind of thing for everybody. For children, to make sure that there's play areas, and it's a welcoming environment for everybody, and it's accessible for all abilities.
I'm Joy McDonald Coltfed, and I'm pastor at Christ on Capitol Hill, which is right here in the Capitol area. And we also talked a lot about plantings, so trees and planters along all of the different main streets and boulevards, with an accompanying much larger team to care for all of those. We talked about prairie in the kind of lower green section of the Capitol Mall, and sort of picture in your mind the part of the southern part of Millennial Park in Chicago, where there's prairie with paths through. But then especially, we also talked about community gardens, places where people could grow food. And we imagined that, I mean, also given 12,000 years of history of indigenous peoples in Minnesota, like a healing space where people could be teaching about respectful harvesting of seeds, and really not only a land acknowledgement, but a use of the land that is in conversation with and under the advisement of the people who have lived here the longest. And we also talked about a dog park somewhere, and splash parks, and like maybe something that could be in the winter skating rinks if we have ice again. And can others from our tables and teams think of things that we have missed?
Another thing was focusing trees in the upper mall area on the east and west lawn panels, putting trees there, and then having the middle lawn be open still.
Yeah, I think we also talked about even half of John Ireland, closing that and having that into a walking, tree, resting, walking trail area where it could be closed off, no traffic, it's only foot traffic for people.
I saw, did you want to say anything?
Right.
Yeah, it's a weird year. So we did have water experts in our room. Does somebody have, this is a question about how do we reuse snow?
Well, obviously melted into a liquid.
More than one, it doesn't, I don't know.
Right. Well, yes, you can reuse snow, but one thing we have to be very careful about is regarding the application of de-icing materials like salt on our streets and sidewalks, that it's really difficult to remove that pollutant. So we'd want to be thinking about that, our de-icing practices in conjunction with utilizing snow and capturing that snow melt. But if we can direct it, though, the preference would be to direct it to a vegetated area where it can melt and soak into the ground versus, being placed in a storm sewer.
I'm
But-
just trying to, when it comes to parking and
Yep.
we have these large, and people are getting tickets, just how can we help with getting rid of all these big
Free
snow
parking.
plows? Right, free parking. Hey, do y'all hear anybody from the city? Free parking.
Yeah, we also
Yes.
talked about free train, actually. And we also talked about, with the community gardens, we talked about a farmer's market that happened. People were remembering how there used to be fireworks and Taste of Minnesota.
Taste of Minnesota.
And so, like, how do we create viable, vibrant community in this whole area? And we talked about what kinds of trees to plant, because there was some feelings about planting things that represent all the different biospheres in Minnesota. But also there was a kind of counter story about planting things that are viable here in Minnesota. And like looking to those who know best about what are going to be the most vital, resilient plants. So.
I think Ray, did you have something?
Oh, yes. Yeah, Paul. Yep, we were talking a lot about Rice and University intersection, because where has been sort of one park is going to be 3 parks, but sort of dissected by roads. And so we did talk a lot about how do we make that, I don't know even exactly what to say, but like a vibrant transition instead of kind of a fail.
All right.
I'll just use this.
That was awesome. Thank you all for participating. Does anybody have any questions about the process thus far? How this information gets used? Like, does anybody have any concerns that you want to? Any questions at all? No? Oh, there's one up there. Way in the back. Yeah.
Maybe you can explain this, and maybe it should be clear to me, but largely the discussion has been around kind of the public infrastructure, right? The mall, the streets, et cetera, et cetera. But as I look to our neighborhood, especially the commercial district going up Rice, so much of it is about what happens with the small businesses there.
Yeah.
And so, is there a forum or a place where we actually talk about that, like that retail interface, actually making those strips more commercially viable so they're pedestrian friendly and pedestrian drawing, so they're more active spaces?
Sure. Your voice very much carries across this room, so congratulations. Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, this project in particular is focused on the public realm, but I would say that in our experience, that investment in the public realm often comes with catalyzing small business to be able to take control. When you invest in public infrastructure, private industry often follows. And so there is an opportunity for this planning process to guide certain decisions. For example, Rice has already been identified. There is funding that's sort of been allocated, and we will be looking at what that potentially could look like, and then hopefully guiding that investment. And so I would say yes, there is an opportunity to influence that. Are we going to, as part of this planning process, my team going to say this needs to be a specific type of restaurant or a specific type of use? That is outside the purview of this project.
To his point, our group did talk a little bit about that, and so the public realm is enhanced. The public realm is enhanced by active ground level uses,
And so we did talk about the idea of incenting active ground level uses through redevelopment of the old Sears site along Rice Street. We also talked about it along Wabasha to better connect downtown and businesses and residents downtown to the Capitol Mall.
Yep. Yeah, and so as part of this project, especially some of those potentially publicly owned buildings, if, for example, we came up with some recommendations of concentrating certain active spaces and saying this is, you know, a corner of one of these many public buildings that currently has a very inactive ground floor, maybe we might be able to push that idea. Additionally, you know, we can, as part of this, define some guidelines in terms of how future development like the Sears site would need to adhere to guidance that the CAP board is placing on its redevelopment through ground floor activation, et cetera. Any other questions? No? Yes? Somebody raise their hand? No? Okay. So what we're going to do now is, hopefully you were listening to all what the four groups had to say. We're actually going to break back up into our small groups, and our focus now is to really draw a framework plan that your group sort of takes everything that everybody's been saying and come up with a framework design that we will then present back to each other in about an hour and a half or 2 hours. Does that make sense?
So yeah, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just add to that, you know, in the morning we were focused on one theme. In the afternoon you can let go of that theme, think about the whole big picture, though I think you can think about some of the catalytic projects that you would want to pursue that maybe incorporate a lot of what has been addressed here today, and kind of use those as a driver for your plans. And then also that we don't only have to do sketches, we can go online and get images. We could not just do plans, but we could do sections like you had sections in the red team. So whatever you kind of think you need to do to represent those ideas, feel free to do it.
Great. Yeah, and thank you everybody for presenting. That was awesome. You should give yourselves a round of applause. All right. So yeah, if you can head up to the same rooms there, and team leaders, please feel free to get your teams going.